Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode 4 to be exact, of C# and .NET development in VS Code for beginners. So in the last episode, we talked all about project management and how you can manage your files and your projects and explore the relationship between your projects using the Solution Explorer as part of C# Dev Kit. And in this episode, we're actually going to write some code and specifically hone in on the C# productivity tools that exist in the editor, thanks to specifically the base C# extension that comes with C# Dev Kit, as well as some IntelliCode, which was part of the IntelliCode extension that came with C# Dev Kit, and maybe another cameo appearance that might show up later, who knows. So to get started, we are currently hanging out in the template project that we hit F5 on after doing some project creation in the last episode. Only this time you'll notice a new element that's been added to the nav bar since then. That's because I went ahead behind the scenes and added some of the skeleton code that we need for the front-end codal experience for the user. So when we go here, we are prompted with the goal of the game, which is to be able to guess the 5-letter coding-related word in 5 tries or less. But unfortunately, whether I write in a valid guess or not, I don't get anything, and that's because I haven't set up any of my game logic for the front-end experience. None of that is connected yet, and that's what we're going to do in this episode. So let's go into VS Code and get started. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is go down to the submit button that I've got right here, and I'm going to add an event handler to it called onClick equal to a method that we'll call submit guess. And all this means onClick is a keyword that once the user hits this button, it will trigger this particular method that I give it. But in this case, I haven't actually defined my method yet, and I could just go do that manually in the code block that's down below here in my Razor file. But I really don't want to do that, especially because I got to scroll down, find the spot I want, all that jazz, try to remember all of my signature definition syntax. So as an added option, you'll notice a little light bulb icon that pops up sometimes when you're either reaching something that's throwing an error or just anything that's formatting related or anything like that. So you might see this pop up, but if you don't see it pop up, you can also use Control Dot, and you'll get a drop down filled with quick fixes, refactorings, code actions. There's a million names for this. Basically, but that light bulb icon indicates that there are available fixes or refactorings that you can use to either improve your code, fix an issue that is being flagged in the editor, like in this example, among other things. There are all kinds of code actions, really. I'm only exploring one right now, but if you go into the documentation, there's a whole section on code actions and refactorings for C# specifically, and there's a huge list of a bunch of different options that you can encounter depending on your scenario. But in my case, what's nice about the scenario I'm currently in is that I can choose to generate an event handler called submit guess, and VS Code will do it for me. And I guess it worked because the little red squiggly has disappeared, but if I really want to make sure that it worked, I can just navigate, of course, to that method. Either by, I could, Control F to find what I'm looking for. I could scroll until I find what I'm looking for, but this file is already getting pretty big. So if you just hit or right-click the method that's being referred to, you can use F12 or select Go to Definition, which will redirect you right to the spot where that method was defined, which saves you a lot of time. There is another variation on Go to Definition called Peak or Peak Definition, Peak Implementation, which I will also try to show later. But it's a really nice way to easily navigate to the method that you want to see the actual definition of, whether it's contained within the same file, like in this example, or maybe it's contained in a different file or even in another project. So really cool, really fast, very easy. And at this point, we need to implement this submit guess function with all of the various game logic and evaluations that we needed to accomplish when the user submits their guess. So let's comment out the parameter and this throw that we've got here because we don't need it. And luckily for us, I have already written up a to-do list of things that we need to accomplish in this method to make all of this happen. So I'm going to go ahead and add these comments to the code block here. And if you want to follow along, as I mentioned earlier, I'm using the same repository for the remaining episodes that started back on the project management episode. So if you clone the repo, you can swap on over to the productivity branch specifically to see what I see. Okay, so let's actually write some code, shall we? And I'm going to exit out of debugging here. So the first thing that I want to do is check to see that the string or that the guess being entered by the user is null or empty. If it is null or empty, then we want to throw a message saying that you actually need to have a word that is 5 letters long. So let's do if string dot is null or empty. And truth be told, this is not an accident. VS Code managed to read my mind with the help of IntelliCode, which is AI-based code suggestions in this case. IntelliCode suggestions are represented by the little star icon that you get in your IntelliSense drop-down here. So this is really nice. I don't have to scroll through until I find the particular method that I'm interested in. It's already able to guess what I want to do based off of the context of my code and where I'm currently at the moment. So I'm going to go with is null or empty, and then we're going to input a value, and that's called new guess. Thank you, IntelliCode. And then let's do the easy part, which is the else statement first. So if the string is null or empty, then we're going to display a guess size message. So let's have that be equal to true. Not true. There we go. And something I want to shout out on as we write this code is you'll notice just how quick we are getting some of these code actions, or how quickly we're getting some of these IntelliCode suggestions. And that's because if you've used or if you've tried to write C# in VS Code in the past, it wasn't always the most reliable. It wasn't always that consistent, and sometimes it could be kind of slow when it came to developing, or when it came to getting those sorts of results. And that's because with the base C# extension, we've done a lot to buff it up with the addition of a new language server protocol, which integrates with the open source components such as Roslyn and Razor, like we're kind of using here, in order to provide that rich type information, but also have it be more reliable and faster. So it's great. Works out. Hopefully that shaves off a little bit more time as you write your code in the editor. Okay, so next thing we need to do is check if our guess is actually 5 characters long once we've determined that it's at the very least not null or empty. So let's do if new guess dot length is not equal to 5. Then we're going to display guess size message equal to true. Else, let's do the bulk of the actual game evaluation now that it's passed the initial test of making sure that the guess is a valid one. So from there, we need to go ahead and do a couple things. So before we do any evaluation, really, we're going to do a display guess size message and set that to false. And we're also going to define a new guess, which is part of that guess class that we had from the Codal Logic project, which I can show you in a minute, if I can spell my words correctly. So new guess. All right. So I did mention before with go to definition that there's another variation you can use called peak definition. So if you'd like to see other variables or classes, see where they're defined and stuff like that, you can right click and then go to peak and then check out peak definition. Oh, excuse me. Here we go. So you can see peak definition, and this is really cool because it gives you an inline windowed experience within the window that you're currently in. So you're not immediately just going over to another file, especially if you don't really care about having that file open all the way just yet. And it kind of gives you a little preview view of what's going on in that particular file. So this is happening all the way over in my Codal Logic project, where this guest class is being defined with all the related methods and things that we're going to call in a second. So really nice way to quickly pop in and see what is happening behind the scenes here. Okay, so we've initialized some things, and now we're going to check to see if the player actually has less than 5 attempts left so that we can go ahead and evaluate their guess. Otherwise, that means they lost the game, sadly. So We don't want that. So we're going to do attempts is less than 5. And then guess.get guess statuses. So this makes up the bulk of the game logic. In this method, we are evaluating each letter and returning a list of the statuses of each letter. So is the letter in the correct position? Is the letter in the wrong position? Or does the letter not exist in the final word at all? And here we got to pass in the answer. So let's do answer. Whoops. Oh, I guess answer doesn't exist. So what did I call it? I called this correct guess. Ugh. I don't really like the word correct guess as a variable name, but we'll stick with it for now. Maybe we'll fix it later. All right, so as I mentioned before, you can do a peek definition if you want, if you really want to see behind the scenes of get guess statuses. So check it out. There you go. So yeah, moving on. Now we're going to check to see that the player guessed correctly. So if the player guessed correctly, in this case, we're going to do guess.is winning guess. Again, putting in the answer, or correct guess. Then we'll display a win message. So we'll do, what is it called? It's called show modal. So when we win or lose, I'm going to pop up a little modal window that lets us know the game status as well as what the correct answer was, whether they won or not. So we're going to set that modal equal to true so that it displays here, and then set the game status message equal to you won. Yay. Unfortunately, we also have the flip side that we need to evaluate here, where we've got an else statement, and then we're going to do the opposite, where we have show model equal to true, except this time the game status message is going to be equal to you lose, or you lost. Okay. Similarly, if the player still has enough attempts left, but they didn't get the winning guess, then we just need to make sure that the number of attempts is being incremented too. All right, what else do we need to do? Oh, we just did it actually. So if the player didn't guess correctly, then we'll update that. Cool beans. And finally, there's 2 more tasks that we need to accomplish in this particular method, which is number 1, making sure that the current guess gets added to the player's list of guesses. Because ideally, if you've never seen Wordle before, we want to see a history of everything that the player has ever guessed. And it will form almost like this grid or matrix type setup where you can see all the different letter statuses over the course of each guess. So let's do guesses.add, and then input the item, which was called guess. There we go. And last but not least, we need to make sure that the input box where the guess was originally submitted is cleared out for the next attempt. So new guess is equal to string.empty. Thank you, IntelliCode. All right, so hopefully, if we did everything right, then we should see what appears to be a mostly working game. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F5 and get going. Yeah, so most of what we did in the editor window was powered specifically by the base C# extension. Again, really cool. We've powered it up with a language server protocol that makes all of those different formatting, coloring, those formatting and coloring tools, as well as code actions, refactorings, and all of that, a lot faster, more consistent, and more reliable. So if you haven't tried to develop C# applications in VS Code recently, I highly recommend that you try it out now with C# Dev Kit installed so that you can reap the benefits of those improvements. Okay, so we're back at our main application. We're going to go over to play Codal. And let's start by not adding a guess and see what happens. Okay, that's a good sign. We get the little display message telling us that the guess needs to be 5 characters long. Let's do a gibberish one that's longer than 5 letters. We still get the same message. And now let's guess for real. I'm going to guess, I don't know, array. Cool. So you can see codal in action here. Just to recap what each of the colors mean. Green means that the letter exists in the word and is in the right location. Yellow means that the letter, in this case R, exists in the word but is in the wrong position. And gray means that that letter does not exist in the final word at all. So let's see if we can't continue and see what happens. I am kind of nervous about the number of R's here, which could be an issue that we might want to address in our debugging episode coming up next. So stay tuned for that, because I feel like duplicate letters aren't being handled correctly here. Just my thought. So let's try to guess Azure. Oh, how about that? Got it right in 2 tries, baby. Get on my level. So now I'm prompted to start a new game, which sure, why not? And darn, it looks like we haven't implemented the new game feature either. So let's go into VS Code and fix that. So to start a new game, really all we're doing is resetting all of the different things such as attempts, making sure that the input box is cleared, all of that jazz. So first, we're going to go to where I defined that modal pop-up, which is right here. Here's the new game button. And just like before with the submit button, I'm going to add an event handler. We're going to call it onClick. And this time we're going to call it start new game. All right, and just like before, it's not defined yet, but let's fix it using a code action that will automatically generate the definition for me. Awesome. And so we did a lot of IntelliCode work beforehand when we were taking a look at implementing the submit guess. And one sec, let's go to a definition. Here we go. But this time you can actually take it a step further if you install an additional extension called GitHub Copilot, which is the thing making a little cameo appearance in this episode because I think it's awesome. So I had it disabled, but let's go ahead and enable it. Here's the little icon representing it below. Personally, I think it looks like a frog, but I think it's supposed to be a robot, maybe? Not sure. I'm going to stick with frog because I think that's cooler. But let's remove some of these parameters and stuff, and we'll be left with a blank method. And check this out. I didn't even write any code yet, but with the power of Copilot, it's able to guess the full method that I am trying to write just based off of the name of it and based off of the context of everything else going on in my code, which is really scary and really cool at the same time. And upon closer look, this is pretty close to what I'm looking for. So I'm going to hit tab to accept this suggestion. So that was really nice. That was a lot of work that I didn't have to do. Thank you, Copilot, for reading my mind. And just to double check that we have everything, we've got all of the guesses, so the guess history cleared out. We've got our attempts reset back to 1. These 2 lines of code represent retrieving an answer from our JSON file that has all the potential answers at random. And we're making sure that the pop-up that shows up whether you win or lost is no longer displayed. And I think the only thing we're missing is making sure that the input box is cleared out. So let's do that by doing new guess equal. Oh, thank you, Copilot. New guess is equal to string.empty. So this is really nice. It can save you a lot of time. Again, it's just using good old machine learning and AI to give you suggestions on a method-long scale, not just whole lines based off of what you're currently doing in your code. So really nice. The thing is, as you could see in that last example, it's not always 100%. It is called Copilot, not GitHub Pilot. So as the other Copilot, I can fill in the blanks, but at the end of the day, it did save me a lot of time of having to think about how to implement this particular method. So now that we've gotten that set up, there is one more thing I want to do before I hit F5 and make sure that this is working right. And that is going back to, where was it? This correct guess variable. I don't like the name of it at all. I feel like guess I'm already using too much as a keyword everywhere, and I know that the moment I decide to expand this project out later, I'm going to trip up on my words and mess up something, and it's going to be a whole thing, and I'm going to have to debug it, and I don't like it. So I'd rather change this to something else like answer, which I feel like my brain is personally going to recognize a little bit quicker. So to do that, instead of going through each of the times where this variable was referenced and making sure they all get spelled correctly, I can just right-click this, and select rename symbol, or F2. And I'm going to change it to answer. And at this point, I can either hit enter to rename every instance of this particular variable, or you can hit shift enter and you can get a nice little preview of everything that's going to get corrected. So this can be across files, it can be across projects, and if you want to, for whatever reason, you can choose to only have certain instances renamed, or you can have all of them renamed like I do. So I'm going to hit apply. And there we go. So I don't have to worry about any potential build errors or anything like that because VS Code went ahead and renamed all of those instances for me without having to worry about the potential human error that gets in the way sometimes. So now that we've done that, let's run the game again and see that everything is working as it should be. Oh, whoops. Sometimes it yells at me when I have another instance of the program up from a previous session. All right, so we're back. Let's go play Codal. I'm gonna guess debug as a word. Ooh, that's a pretty good sign. Let's see. I'm really bad at Codal when I'm put on the spot, so I'm just gonna come up with some random words and see if we can't get to the bottom of it, or if we lose, then we lose. So I know you're probably watching this video screaming what the answer is, but don't hate. You try doing this when you're being recorded. It's hard. Gibberish words, because I gave up. Here we go. So the correct answer was build, and this time, hopefully when I hit a new game, it'll work successfully, which it did. Sweet, so thank you so much, GitHub Copilot to the rescue. Definitely download that extension if you want even more advanced AI-based suggestions for as you write your code, which is pretty neat. And that concludes this episode. We talked specifically all about C# productivity and the editor. We talked about all kinds of things such as AI code completions with the help of IntelliCode and GitHub Copilot. We also talked about some of the performance and reliability enhancements of existing features such as formatting, colorization, code actions, refactorings with the help of the new and improved base C# extension, which is part of C# Dev Kit. And as a result, we were able to fill in the game logic for Codal, which is now mostly working, except earlier when I said I think there's something wrong with some duplicate letter action there. So tune in next time when we get to the complicated, frustrating part of everyone's development workflow, which is good old debugging. But luckily for us, there's some really nice debugging updates in VS Code when you're developing C#. So stay tuned for that, and happy coding.